Okay, back to Proclus on the Timaeus. Last time we looked at the various gifts of Athena. So she seemed to give us our passive capacity for wisdom. Her spear was severing of materiality, cutting through the ranks of being. Her shield was like undefiled reason. So these gifts were given primarily to the Athenians, secondarily to the Saiyans. I'd rather say Sacians, I think, because when I say Satans, it sounds like I'm saying the devil, but that's not it. So, all right, moving on. Next quote. Choosing for this purpose the place in which you were born, as she foresaw that from the excellent temperature of the seasons it would produce the most sagacious men. Okay, and that was a popular opinion in the Hellenistic world, that the climate affected mental disposition. So, like, people from the north, where it's cold, were spirited. People from the south and east were less so, more kind of appetitive. And then the Greek climate, being moderate, kind of gets the best of both worlds. Prior to this, the goddess was said to have been allotted the Attic region, but it is now said that she chose it. Both, however, concur, and neither is the being allotted contrary to her will, nor is her choice disorderly, as is the case with a partial soul. So, allotment and choice are separate here. Things that are necessary here are different from things that we will, which are within our power here. But for a divine necessity, the divine necessity concurs with the divine will. Choice with allotment, and to choose with to be allotted. Properties in the intelligible realm are more concentrated and condensed. A thing will have an essence and an energy that act together there. With souls and lower things, their essence and energy may be more or less separable to some extent. So all the properties of things are joined more tightly in higher realms. What this place, however, has been before by us shown, viz., that it is interval and that which is truly place. Let's see. The place in which we were born, interval. So this is a much broader interpretation of the passage than specifically the location of Athens, apparently. Interval is sometimes used synonymously with kind of the lowest level of corporeal matter. All right. For the divisions of divine allotments are divisions of these, in order that they may be established with invariable sameness prior to things which subsist according to time. But it must now be added that the soul of the universe, possessing the productive principles of all divine mundane natures, and being suspended from the essences prior to herself, inserts in different parts of the interval an alliance to different powers and certain symbols of the divine orders in the gods. Okay, so it's a little bit obscure what's going on here. The interval, like I said, is that most basic kind of bodily aspect of matter. There is matter in itself, hypothetically or abstractly, but not in concrete. Matter itself, as an absolute, doesn't exist. Because matter is privatory. It subsists by way of a negation, and yet the lowest level of body, proximate to that which in no way exists, is this interval. It's described as a kind of swirling, irregular, indefinite quantity, and it is also said to be neither small nor great. The indefinite dyad is characterized in the Philebus as kind of the great and small. So the indefinite is not just pertaining to the small. Usually when we think of matter, we today with our modern notions think of like very small things, but matter as the receptacle of form applies at the large scale and the small scale. So the allotment of Athena takes place at the level of the interval. So because she is a goddess, her energies descend all the way to the lowest level of things, being the interval itself. That seems to be what is being said. But let's see. For this interval is proximately suspended from her, and is an instrument connascent with her. And she is, therefore, a rational and psychical world. She also renders this sensible world endued with interval and vital through divine impressions. Hence the interval itself, though it is said to be continued and immovable, yet is not entirely without difference with reference to itself, since neither is the soul of the universe perfectly without difference in itself towards itself, but one part, as it were, of it is the circle of the same, and another the circle of the different. And why do I assert this of the soul? I'd like to go with Proclus for a while, understand what's being said. He might be referring to a different concept with the interval, though it still might mean the same thing. Okay. Yeah, it would be immovable because it doesn't yet participate of location. It's just indefinite quantity. I may have said incorrectly that it was moving. It's just an indefinite quantity, maybe is the best way, if this is the interval that I'm thinking of. So we'll keep going. Why does he assert this of soul? For neither is much celebrated intellect without difference in itself, though all things in it are, as it were, of the same color. For all things do not possess an equal power in intellect, but some are more total and others more partial. Nor is this wonderful. For the demiurge himself contains in himself first, middle, and last orders. Whence also I think Orpheus, indicating the order of his powers, says that his head is the refulgent heaven, but his eyes are the sun and the opposing moon. Though, therefore, this interval should have one essence, unattended with difference, yet the power of soul and the allotted orders of daimons, and prior to these the gods, dividing it according to the demiurgic order and the allotments of justice, demonstrate that there is much difference in the parts of it. Hence it must be admitted that the choice becomes interval, and from the essence of the gods, and that it is not such as we see in partial souls. For the former is essential, but the latter is alone defined according to the present life, and the former is eternal, but the latter temporal. So what's going on here overall? Of course, we have this allotment of Athena to the location around Athens, but he magnifies this allotment at the kind of cosmogonic scale, generation of the universe, the demiurgic act, and that allotment is a portion of the interval. And I think it is this kind of indefinite quantum at the small and large scale before any other definite formal property is instantiated in things. And it's interesting that it's said to be an instrument of Athena. And I think it's actually worth rereading all of this again. So with all of that in mind, let's go back to Proclus now. Prior to this, the goddess was said to have been allotted the Attic region, but it is now said that she chose it. So this first point is pretty obvious. Actually, we can skip that. What this place, however, has been before shown by us, viz. That it is interval, and that which is truly place. Matter, it was called space by Pythagoreans, and matter is the principle of spatial individuation. Okay. But you may say that it's not yet individuated because it's the principle of individuation. Just like the principle of motion for Aristotle is itself unmoved. For the divisions of divine allotments, okay, the division of divine allotments are divisions of these, in order that they may be established with invariable sameness prior to things which subsist according to time. Okay. Divisions of divine allotments are divisions of these. I'm not sure exactly what these is supposed to mean. I guess the divine allotments, the divisions of nature, occur at the level of the interval, so all the way through all the ranks to the very lowest level, and those divisions differentiate the interval itself, the quantum itself, before the cycle of time, I think is what's being said. So that those divisions are instantiated in a way prior to space and time, because place itself, that lowest level matter, is the principle of spatial individuation, and we're dividing up the interval and creating. So in another way, I might make a Proclus-like move here and say that the allotment of a given portion to Athena may at the same time be the creation of that separate region. And we're not talking Athens here, we're talking like the Athenaic aspects of nature, which fall within one division of nature, one division of the interval at its most fundamental level, I guess. But it must now be added that the soul of the universe, possessing the productive principles of all divine mundane natures, so the world soul doesn't possess productive principles of super mundane natures, because the mundane natures are subordinate to the world soul, and so the world soul causally contains them. Those that are hypercosmic and intellectual would be beyond the world soul, so it wouldn't possess the productive principles of those. And being suspended from the essences prior to herself, inserts in different parts of the interval an alliance to different powers and certain symbols of the divine orders in the gods. Okay. So she has the seeds of all mundane gods. Now, this is not Athena. This is the soul of the universe. The soul of the universe has all of the mundane gods, their principles in her, and suspended from divine essences. So you have differentiation above and differentiation below, and those are woven into the interval. Okay, so it's not an instrument of Athena, but the interval is like an instrument of the world soul, I assume. Let's keep going. And being suspended from the essences prior to herself, inserts in different parts of the interval an alliance to different powers. Right. So the world soul creates this division, creates these divine allotments, and certain symbols of the divine orders in the gods. So in the younger gods or mundane gods, meaning the planets. So there are symbols in planetary motions of these divisions. For this interval is proximately suspended from her. So yeah, body is suspended from soul, and just like the one is the only thing that makes it all the way down to like matter itself in a way. So the world soul goes all the way down. In general, body is suspended from soul, but the highest soul will be that which suspends the lowest level of body. So the interval is the lowest level of body. That means it's not suspended from anything else but the world soul. And so it is an instrument connascent with her. The interval is directly suspended from the world soul. As she is, therefore, a rational and psychical world, she also renders this sensible world endued with interval and vital through divine impressions. Right? So sensibility has its root in the interval, matter, separability, and also like the property of matter that it, divulses. And there's a simpler, like more modern philosophical term I'm looking for. it's impenetrable, right? It doesn't stack together, it separates. And that's necessary for sensibility. Hence the interval itself, though it is said to be continued and immovable, yet, so it's said to be immovable, continuous, kind of indefinite, yet it is not entirely without difference with reference to itself, since neither is the soul of the universe perfectly without difference in itself towards itself, but one part, as it were, of it is the circle of the same, and another the circle of the different. And why do I assert this of soul? For neither is much celebrated intellect without difference in itself, though all things in it are, as it were, of the same color. For all things do not possess an equal power in intellect, but some are more total, some more partial. So intellect has internal differentiations, soul has internal differentiations, and so even the interval then will have certain internal differentiations, even though all we have to work with the interval is indefinite magnitude. Nor is this wonderful, for the demiurge himself contains in himself first, middle, and last orders. Whence also, I think Orpheus, indicating the order of his powers, the demiurge's powers, says that his head is the refulgent heaven, but his eyes are the sun and the opposing moon. So, internal differentiations in the demiurge. Though, therefore, this interval should have one essence unattended with difference, yet the power of soul and the allotted orders of daimons, and prior to these the gods, dividing it according to the demiurgic order and the allotments of justice, demonstrate that there is much difference in the parts of it. Okay, so in some sense, interval itself maybe can be said to be unattended with difference, undifferentiated, and indefinite, but once it's divided into parts by the world soul, then those parts of interval can be said to have differences. So now this whole section seems perfectly clear, to me at least. Hence it must be admitted that the choice becomes internal and from the essence of the gods, and that it is not such as we see in partial souls. For the former is essential, but the latter is alone defined according to the present life, and the former is eternal, but the latter temporal. By place, therefore, we must not understand the earth or this air, but prior to these, the immovable interval, which is always illuminated after the same manner by the gods, and divided by the allotments of justice. For these material natures are at one time adapted, and at another unadapted, to the participation of the gods. And it is necessary that prior to things which sometimes participate, there should be those which are always suspended after the same manner from the gods, and thus much may suffice respecting these particulars. Right, so when there is a partial participant in a thing, that, implies the existence of a permanent participation in the thing. So if individual regions in the sensible world are sometimes adapted, sometimes not, to the reception of divine natures, which we already said before, that it's not that at a certain time Athena chose to bring about ancient Athens 9,000 years before Solon's time. Instead, Athena was always allotted that portion, and the place and the people became adapted to finally receive the proper energies of their proper goddess, who had been the attendant of that region from all time. So if that's the case with mundane natures, then that means there should be some kind of place, some kind of interval that always receives the divine allotments without interruption. And so that is the interval itself and those initial divisions of the interval, which are in a way being treated as higher than the complex, corporeal regions that we experience in the world. So is the interval then the absolute bottom, and is it ugly, or is it higher in a certain sense than the physical world? I was thinking of it as more a lowly kind of thing, but maybe even being more lowly, it is still a permanent participant in the divine allotments. That seems odd, though, that a partial participant should be superior to a permanent participant. So we'll have to consider more carefully as we go forward what the kind of status of the interval is, superior or inferior to mundane regions. Okay. With respect, however, to the excellent temperature of the seasons, which is productive of sagacious men, Timaeus and certain other Platonists understand the words according to their apparent meaning, viz. That the... So now that we're done with this kind of cosmogonic interpretation, we have the evident meaning of the text, viz. That the Attic region, on account of the excellent temperature of the seasons of the year, is adapted to the production of sagacious men. But Longinus doubts the truth of their assertion. For the contrary is seen to be the case, since about this place there is a great want of symmetry in dryness from excess of heat and cold tempestuous weather. Nor, if the place was of this kind, would they yet be able to preserve the immortality of souls if sagacity was implanted in them through the excellent temperature of the seasons. Would they yet be able to preserve the immortality of souls if sagacity was implanted in them through the excellent temperature of the seasons? I'm not sure exactly what he means by that, but it seems, I guess, out of place that the quality of soul should be as like flippantly determined as that. But he says that this excellent temperature is not to be referred to the condition of the air, but that it is a certain nameless peculiarity of the region contributing to sagacity. For as certain waters are prophetic, and certain places are productive of disease, and are pestilential, thus also it is not at all wonderful that a certain peculiarity of country should contribute to prudence and sagacity. So Proclus is writing as though he's like favorable towards this idea. Longinus has not been treated the most favorably, but at least this idea of Longinus Proclus seems to like. So, all right, what is unique about a region doesn't have to be literal temperature or climate. It can be some unquantifiable energy that the region has because of its divine allotment. Origen, however, refers this excellent temperature to the circulation of the heavens, for from thence the fertility and sterility of souls are derived, as Socrates says in the Republic. He, however, apprehends the truth in a more partial manner, but Longinus is ignorant that he makes the peculiarity to be corporeal, and that he is entangled in the doubts which Porphyry proposes to him. Okay, so Longinus treats it as a kind of corporeal energy. Proclus likes the idea of an energy, but doesn't want to make it corporeal, it sounds like. And Porphyry argued against that kind of line by Longinus, and we'll see what his argument was here. For how can one peculiarity of air render men adapted to different pursuits? So if it's a physical thing, then what accounts for the specific differences within a region of different men? And in the next place, a similar peculiarity still remaining, how comes it to pass that there is now no longer the same natural excellence in the genius of the inhabitants? But if the peculiarity is corruptible, it must be shown that it is that. But if the peculiarity is corruptible, it must be shown what it is that is corruptive of it. Okay, so if the energies kind of waned as time passed, because the ancient Athenian race was the best ever, and then subsequent Athenian races haven't quite lived up to it, so that energy then, if it corrupted, what was it that led it to be corrupted? So those are some doubts about a physical interpretation of the divine energy. It is, however, better to say that the gods, having divided the whole of space conformably to the demiurgic order, each portion of place receives souls adapted to it. That portion, indeed, which is martial, receiving souls of a more animated and irascible nature. That which is Apollonian, prophetic souls. That which is Asclepian, medical. that which is Athenaic, prudent, and sagacious souls. But this is effected through a certain quality, or rather, each portion of place possesses a power of this kind from its allotted divinity. And Plato calls this adaptation, excellence of temperature. So Proclus's interpretation is that excellence of temperature actually means the excellence of the divine energy that exists in the place incorruptibly, I guess. Since there are many physical, psychical, demoniacal, and angelical powers in each portion of place, but each unity of the allotted divinity unites and mingles all these in an unmingled manner. Okay. So it's not just the allotment of one God. There are many physical, psychical, and demoniacal, angelical powers in each portion of place. And of course that makes sense because Athena will have angelic souls, demoniacal souls, ordinary souls that are all in her train, as well as physical things. So each portion of place has energies that are physical, psychical, etc. But each unity of the allotted divinity unites and mingles all these in an unmingled manner. Each unity, so each henad of the allotted divinity. So in the previous list, psychical, physical, demoniacal, we're cutting through the different orders of being. So I guess he's saying that the unity from the god or goddess, the henad, mingles all these in an unmingled manner. Just like our personal, the one of our soul, unites all of the elements of our soul in a way without confusion. So all the parts of us remain what they are, separate, and yet they're united in one by the unity that we participate of individually. Since, however, the seasons are allotted from the Father, the guardianship of these portions of place and allotments, to whose care, as Homer says, quote, the mighty heaven and Olympus are committed, and according to which the co-adaptations of souls similar to places is effected. Hence Plato suspends this excellent temperature from the seasons, the whole of it deriving from thence its subsistence. Okay. We're going to keep going. The goddess, therefore, perceiving that the Attic portion of interval, which is always guarded by the seasons, is adapted to the reception of sagacious souls, selected it for this purpose. Not that this place was once deprived of Athena, but at another time was under her allotted guardianship, for the text demonstrates the contrary, but because there are also in the interval itself different aptitudes for the reception of divine illuminations according to different parts, which aptitudes were inserted by the whole demiurge, who uniformly comprehends the powers of all the gods posterior to himself. Okay. So all the differences in the parts of the interval that, characterize the different allotments of the gods, all of them were inserted in the first place by the demiurge. So it's not that Athena creates her own allotment. The demiurge creates all the allotments, and then Athena chooses / is allotted hers. These powers, however, are corroborated and perfected by, or rather proceed from, the presiding gods. So those were one of the orders subordinate to the demiurgic triad, still demiurgic gods. These powers, however, are corroborated and perfected by the presiding gods, as therefore, with respect to the elections of lives, the soul that chooses its proper life acts with rectitude after the same manner. Also, the soul which is arranged in a place conformable to the choice of its life energizes in a greater degree than the soul which is disseminated in a foreign place. So not only can souls follow the wrong gods, they can also incarnate in a place that doesn't match the allotment of their presiding deity. But to this arrangement, the one circulation of the heavens contributes, which introduces a fertility and sterility of souls. So to make sure that souls are incarnating in the correct places, the heavens in their circulation govern the timing of birth and when, like, conception is difficult. Interestingly, then, doing the job of those guardians in the Republic who decided when different pairs of guardians would, bear children and when not. And that's also the reason why the perfect state fails in the Republic. It's that the Guardians wouldn't be able to do the complex math that governs these cycles. And so then they would, their recommendations for unions would eventually start to come on inauspicious times. And so the wrong sorts of souls would incarnate in the state. But there is the natural fertility and sterility that kind of does that job just based on kind of astrological energies. Very interesting stuff, I think. In fertile periods, therefore, there is a greater, but in barren periods, a less number of sagacious men. Hence, as when a husbandman chooses good land for the efficacious growth of the seeds, knowing that when the season is fertile, he shall reap greater benefit, but when it is barren, less, on account of the power of the earth, thus also the text says that the goddess chose this place as productive of sagacious men, in order that when the period is fertile, it may have more, and when the period is barren, may have less of prudent and sagacious men, in consequence of falling off from a life adapted to the place. Okay, so it is a divine energy, but just like in other cases, the aptness of the recipient of the divine energy kind of waxes and wanes. Sometimes the region around Athens is ripe and receives the energy of the goddess to produce sagacious men. Sometimes it's not as ready to receive. And it's not the case that it's a corporeal energy, like Longinus seems to have suggested, that degraded through time. Instead, it's the divine allotment. The place is, it kind of waves back and forth, being more apt and less apt at different times for the reception of the goddess and the sagacious men that she facilitates the sowing of. We must not, however, wonder if Plato praises the excellent temperature of the visible seasons. So we've seen the true meaning of the seasons. The seasons are allotted by the demiurge, and so the excellent temperature really is a signifier of the energies of these divine allotments at a higher level, but the mundane meaning, the good temperature of the visible seasons, may also apply. For there is one excellent temperature with reference to the health of bodies, and another contributing to the reception of sagacious souls, such as is that of the Attic region. For though there is not always the same sagacity in those that inhabit this region, yet there is always a certain greater abundance of it through the peculiarity of the place, and the aptitude of the seasons. Such, therefore, is our opinion respecting these particulars. Proclus typically is trying to get as many levels of interpretation to coincide as possible. The divine Iamblichus, however, does not understand by place one corporeal formed condition, but an incorporeal cause pervading through the earth, sustaining bodies by life, and comprehending all interval. For in a place of this kind, he says, the goddess fashions truly good men, and causes them to inhabit. But whether he accords with the words of Plato may be surveyed from what has been said. If, however, it be requisite, desisting from these things, to contemplate wholes according to the analogous, it must be said that this goddess, fabricating and weaving the universe in conjunction with her father, everywhere distributes to wholes, and to things of the better coordination, a more perfect allotment. But these are more replete with wisdom than their opposites, and are more adapted to the goddess. We shall show, therefore, from the following words of Plato, how that which excels in prudence is of a more minerval Athenaic characteristic. Okay. So the Iamblichus quote, it's a little bit hard to tell what he means. So it's instead, place is not a corporeally formed condition, but an incorporeal cause pervading through the earth, sustaining bodies by life, and comprehending all interval. For in a place of this kind, he says, the goddess fashions truly good men and causes them to inhabit. I don't think I'm going to be able to interpret that fully. I guess the place, maybe he means the place, generically speaking, is kind of the first place, the first division of the interval. So it comprehends the interval because it comprehensively divides it in totality. Sustains bodies by life. Sustains bodies, I guess, spatiality sustains bodies in a sense. But the place that differentiates the interval, I guess, is an incorporeal cause pervading through the earth. Yep, I'm definitely not fully understanding the Iamblichus line, but that's okay. For in a place of this kind, he says, next sentence, but whether he accords with the words of Plato, next sentence, if, however, it be requisite, desisting from these things, to contemplate wholes according to the analogous, it must be said that this goddess, fabricating and weaving the universe in conjunction with her father, everywhere distributes to wholes, and to things of the better coordination a more perfect allotment. Okay. So, Athena, in conjunction with her father, the demiurge, distributes allotments. So there's been a kind of back and forth between the world soul and Athena. So is Athena ever identified with the world soul? It seems like we're getting pretty close to that, but I haven't ever encountered that before in Proclus or any other Neoplatonist. So that's something to consider as a possibility. Okay. Let's see. But these, let's see. These are more replete with wisdom than their opposites. So the higher elements in the world that receive the better allotments are more replete with wisdom than their opposites and are more adapted to the goddess. We shall show, therefore, from the following words, how that which excels in prudence is of a more Athenaic characteristic. So why is Athena the one that gives more wise natures to things? We'll see. Next quote. The goddess, therefore, being a lover both of war and wisdom, first selected this place for the habitation of men most similar to herself. Proclus. In what is here said, Plato delivers to us the most accurate conception respecting this greatest divinity, unfolding to those who are sufficiently able to perceive his meaning the indications of theologists. Okay. Pretty quick quote. Says, it seems like she's being characterized as warlike and wise, but what else here? Different interpreters, however, betake themselves to different arrangements of the goddess, some indeed narrating their opinion more enigmatically, but others more clearly, yet not confirming what they assert. For Porphyry, placing Minerva or Athena in the moon, says that souls descend from thence, which possess at one time the same irascibility and mildness, which possess at one and the same time irascibility and mildness, and that on this account the mystagogues in Eleusis are lovers of wisdom and lovers of war, since it is said that the race of those who are leaders of the mysteries in Eleusis is derived from Musaeus, the offspring of the moon, and also that the Hermes there subsists about the moon, from which also the race of the criers is derived. The divine Iamblichus, however, blames these assertions as not well preserving the analogy, for he interprets war as that which entirely subverts the whole of a disorderly, confused, and material nature, but wisdom as immaterial and separate intelligence. Okay. So Iamblichus's interpretation of war in Athena is the way she, destroys material, confused, disorderly nature, and then the wisdom is an immaterial and separate intelligence. He also says that this goddess is the cause of both these, which likewise the Athenians imitate through a prudent and warlike life. He adds that the Athenian region is well adapted to the reception of such like souls. So we can see in the character of Athena, her warlike nature, beating down the materially invested, confused, disorderly. She's a good goddess of war, doesn't have like tempestuous mood swing type events like Ares sometimes does in the myths. Not that the real Ares would be that way, because all the gods are good for Proclus and Plato. All right, let's keep going. If, however, it be requisite that the conceptions of these men should become manifest, and prior to these, that what is delivered by Plato should be shown to accord in the highest degree with theologists, we must assert as follows, deriving what we say from a supernal origin. In the Demiurge, and father of the whole world, many orders of gods that have the form of the one present themselves to the view. And these are of a guardian or demiurgic or elevating or connective or perfective characteristic. Okay, so here we have five genres of gods. We've heard of the guardian and demiurgic, and I've encountered some of these terms elsewhere, but I think in this work we're encountering elevating, connective, and perfective orders of gods for the first time. So we have guardian, demiurgic, elevating, connective, perfective. Okay. But the undefiled and untamed deity Athena is one of the first intellectual unities subsisting in the demiurge, according to which he himself remains firm and immutable, and all things proceeding from him participate of inflexible power, and through which he intellectually perceives everything, and is separate in an exempt manner from all beings. All theologists, therefore, call this divinity Athena, as being brought forth indeed from the summit of her father and abiding in him, being a demiurgic, separate, and immaterial intelligence. So it seems that this is one of the first intellectual unities subsisting in the demiurge. Athena is one of the first, according to which the demiurge himself remains firm and immutable. It's because of Athena, this first emanation out of the demiurge, that the demiurge himself is firm and immutable. Okay, kind of looking at Athena as a property of the demiurge there. And all things proceeding from him participate of inflexible power, and through which he intellectually perceives everything. So through Athena, the demiurge intellectually perceives everything, is what's being said, it seems. And is separate in an exempt manner from all beings. All theologists, therefore, call this divinity Athena as being brought forth indeed from the summit of her father and abiding in him, being a demiurgic, separate, and immaterial intelligence. So Athena is, I speculated before whether she's in the genre of the guardian deities. Here it says she's a demiurgic deity, but I'm not positive whether you can be in multiple of these genres of deity at once or not. Can you be both a perfective and guardian deity, etc.? that we'll just have to kind of keep an eye out for. Hence, Socrates in the Cratylus celebrates her as Theone, or deific intellection. But theologists also consider her as in conjunction with other divinities, sustaining all things in the one demiurge, and arranging wholes together with her father. Okay, so in her father, she's arranging wholes, sustaining all things. Hence, through the first of these, they denominate her philosophic, but through the second, philopolemic. For she, who, according to the form of the one, connectedly contains all the paternal wisdom, is a philosopher, and she who invariably rules over all contrariety may be properly called a lover of war. Hence, Orpheus, speaking of her birth, says that Jupiter generated her from his head, with armor shining like a brazen flower. Okay. All right. Since, however, it was necessary that she should proceed into second and third orders, she appears in the order to which Persephone belongs, according to the undefiled heptad. There was a group of 7 gods, the heptad, just some of the more, gods following the train of the demiurge, assisting in the demiurgic act of creation. So in that order, Athena appears in the heptad, but she generates every virtue from herself and elevating powers, and illuminates secondary natures with intellect and an undefiled life. So she has elevating powers as well as demiurgic powers. I don't know if that means she's also an elevating god or not. Hence, she is called Kore Tritogenes. She likewise appears among the liberated gods, uniting the lunar order with intellectual and demiurgic light, causing the productions of those divinities to be undefiled, and demonstrating the one unity of them to be unmingled with their depending powers. She also appears in the heavens and the sublunary region, and according to the united gift of herself, imparts the cause both of the philosophic and the philopolemic power. For her inflexibility is intellectual, and her separate wisdom is pure and unmingled with secondary natures. And the one characteristic peculiarity of Athena, Athenaic providence, extends as far as to the last orders. For since wherever there are partial souls that resemble her divinity, they exert an admirable prudence and exhibit an unconquerable strength, what ought we to say of her attendant choirs of daimons, or divine mundane liberated and ruling orders? For all these receive, as from a fountain, the twofold peculiarity of this goddess. Hence also the divine poet Homer, indicating both these powers of Athena in conjunction with the fabulous devices, says, or not the fabulous, but fabulous devices, meaning poetic devices, I guess. These verses, the radiant veil her sacred fingers wove, floats in rich waves, and spreads the court of Jove, her father's warlike robe, her limbs invest. And it's very dense, so we're not going to keep going. We're going to give ourselves a break, come back some other time, and probably reread this paragraph. But yeah, we're going into the powers of Athena again, and just more kind of extrapolation and expansion on the allotment and also on how her powers are distributed. So hope this was interesting for you guys. It was definitely some very interesting stuff for me, especially what was the stuff about the interval. I'm going to be looking very carefully at the treatment in terms of quality. Where does the interval stack up? So all right. Thanks, everybody. We will do this